Hello, everybody, and welcome to Virtual TrekCon with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
We are joined today by Mr. Adam Howard, visual effects artist. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you?
Doing awesome. So before we start recording, Sirach and I were commenting on how awesome your voice is. It's very relaxed and pleasant, and also your accent. You said you're from Australia, yeah?
Yeah, I am. I'm from Melbourne, but I've lived in the States for 30 years now. But yeah, originally from Melbourne, Australia.
I visited Melbourne. Very beautiful place.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love your country over there. Beautiful water, the beaches, and just the whole layout of the city. Very clean, very nice.
Beaches and the gardens. It's also the kind of cultural center of the country with the theatre center, and one of the first feature films that was ever made was actually made in Melbourne. Feature-length movies and things like the clapper. Most people don't know was invented by a guy from Melbourne.
Clap on, clap off.
No, the film clapper.
Like not the clapper.
Not the clap on.
Lights. Okay.
Sorry, guys. At a start in the Star Trek virtual convention, we clap like this, like the Bajorans.
Oh, okay. No, so the clapper that actually does the scene, the markers.
Called Frank Thring Senior. He was one of the first people showing movies in like movie theaters in Australia, and his son Frank then went on to become an actor, and in much later years he played Pontius Pilate in Ben-Hur. So he's the guy that drops the handkerchief and starts the whole chariot race. But his dad invented technically the clapper part of the slate.
Wow, that's cool. A little bit of trivia there.
Yeah, I have no idea where that even came from, but that's pretty interesting.
I do want to give a quick shout out to Atomic, who has sponsored us, helped us promote this. Atomic.video for techies, Trekkies, gamers, and geeks. Lots of cool stuff. Lots of cool stuff with Nichelle Nichols and Walter Koenig and all of our old buddies. So check that out. We'll have that in the description box below. Now, Adam Howard, you've pretty much done visual effects on all of Star Trek from Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise. Very much so, especially Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Also, two of the Next Generation movies, right? You're a visual effects supervisor on First Contact and Insurrection, right?
Yeah, I was one of the visual effects supervisors on First Contact, and I was kind of a consultant on Insurrection.
Wow, that's incredible. Also, you, before we get too deep into that, you also have something you can show us, right?
Yeah, I got this little thing.
Oh, wow. That's a hood ornament on a classic Rolls Royce, ladies and gentlemen. No, that's what they give you when you're the best in your category in your profession.
Yeah, it was. It's an incredible thing to get. I was lucky enough working on Trek. I was lucky enough to get nominated 9 times, and I won 4 of these. This is actually the first year that I was nominated. I was nominated twice, and as if that weren't bizarre enough, we went on the night and we won both of them.
No way.
Yeah, it was really.
So wait, twice for 2 separate things? Is that
2 separate episodes of Next Generation? Yeah.
Okay.
Now, were all of your nominations for Star Trek?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. And do you remember what all those nominations were? Do you specifically remember which episodes the wins were?
The first 2 were A Matter of Time, the episode with Matt Frewer, and Conundrum.
Great. Great. You know, I reference that one a lot. That's the one where they wake up with a different memory, with a loss of memory, right?
Well, the bit that I really remember about it, seeing it's nearly 30 years ago, was there's a member of the crew who is trying to lead them astray. And right at the pivotal point in the episode, Riker and Worf realize that he's not who he says he is. And they fire a phaser at him and kill him. And so that I was doing that with those shots and animating all the phases and doing all that kind of destruction.
Right. Well, it wasn't just a quick phase. You also see his true form as like a different alien for a second. What is it, like a Sataran or something like that?
I can't remember the name of the alien, but yeah, it ate away his skin and revealed the alien form underneath.
Wow.
And then The third one was for the Voyager pilot.
Caretaker.
And then this one was for All Good Things, the final episode of Next Gen.
One of the best episodes in the history of Star Trek, I think. Two-parter.
An amazing episode.
Just, was there a specific part of that episode that you remember, like, really being proud of your work, like, just more than the rest of that? Was there like one scene or one shot that you're just like, oh, this is so good?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a shot as it was storyboarded. There was a scene where the Klingon bird of prey is coming up. No, the Enterprise is coming up toward the Klingon bird of prey to destroy it, and they were firing photon torpedoes, and it was going to destroy this massive ship. And I said to the guys who were supervising the show, "Come on, guys! I mean, it's the final episode. We've got to do something really big." And they said, "Okay, so what have you got in mind?" And I said, "Well, why don't we say that, and they hadn't shot the episode yet. We were still talking about the upcoming episode. And I said, why don't they try and combine all the power from all of their phaser banks and do it into that front nacelle, and then do a super phaser and just carve the whole ship in half."
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And I animated all the phaser kind of consolidating into one massive one and then ripping through the center of the bird of prey. And we were all very proud that the flames on that were shot on Dan Curry's barbecue. And then we pocketed them into the ship and made it all look real. And yeah, Sarah, you remember Dan. And, yeah, so it was just a beautiful shot, and it worked so well. But I think, the other thing in that show, we had just amazing moments where the technology at the time, and most people don't know when they go back and look at that show, that there was no CGI in those days.
Right.
It was very fledgling, but nothing that could be really used for television, not until, say, Voyager started happening. And so everything was miniatures. And we would have huge armadas of ships, and you couldn't shoot them on the stage in MFG because it wasn't long enough to get far enough away from the model. And so we'd use things like the Hallmark Christmas decorations, and stick a cluster of them on a strip and stick them in the far background, and all those kind of things that were really fun ways to just get around the physical limitations of how and where we were shooting at the time.
Sure.
But yeah, All Good Things is just a very, very special episode.
There's one, I'm pretty sure it's got to be All Good Things, but there's this scene. It's interesting how you guys create these images that we remember for the rest of our lives. Actors like Sirach, they deliver these lines, they do these things that we remember for the rest of our lives. And visual effects artists like yourself, you create these images we remember. And one of the ones I remember, I think it must have been from All Good Things, is when Riker says, he's like Captain Riker at that point on a different ship. He says, "I'll see if I can get the Klingons' attention," like a cool line like that. And he fires one phaser that's like a cannon and just blasts through the actual Klingon ship, just clean through it. I think it was in that scene, and that's like an image that I've always remembered forever as like one of the coolest things I've ever seen, along with what you're saying in Conundrum, where this guy gets revealed and suddenly we see his true form for a couple seconds.
Yeah, it's funny how when you're working on it at the time, you're taking it seriously because it's your job, and you take great pride in doing good work. But there was no way any of us could ever have, even understanding the impact that the original series had in the 60s, there was no way that any of us could understand the impact that the work we were doing at the time was having on the audience. And a few years ago, I was invited to go and speak at a convention in Brazil. And a guy came up to me after I went to the stadium, and there were like 4,500 people there. And it was me on stage for a couple of hours talking about a few decades working in animation and visual effects. And this guy came up and he said, "I just wanted to thank you for coming." He said, "I realized when I was watching your demo reel that you created my childhood."
Right.
And it hit me like a freight train, because I never really thought about the fact that, what you're doing is having that effect on people. And so every time I work with crews, I just say, remember, there's somebody out there who's going to see the stuff we're doing, and some people are going to love it, and some people are going to hate it, and some people are going to be really moved by it and inspired by it. And so take it seriously.
Wow. Absolutely. I think that's great advice.
And beyond that, you're not just, kind of shaping what kids enjoy when they're watching it, like I said, that impacted me, and it's a memory I will have for the rest of my life, is when I saw that scene that you created.
Yeah.
But also future iterations of Star Trek and future generations of visual effects supervisors and creators and artists, they will look back on your work as the model of what they are trying to create now.
I feel so old.
I mean, the same generation as you, just the people that are
No, it's really nice. It's really nice to think that, there are going to be artists and supervisors out there that are going to go back and look at it as reference. And I know when J.J. Abrams did his movie the first time around, I was talking to the guys at ILM, and I went to the premiere at the Chinese Theatre in Ohio. I was talking to the guys afterwards, and they said, "So what did you think of the phases?" And I said, "They're fantastic. They just look exactly the way I wanted them to look. If I'd ever had any control." And they said, "Well, there's a reason they look like that." And said, I looked at yours and I copied them. But then, they upgraded the whole thing, and they made them even better than I could ever have done. I mean, speaking of technology again, that was the problem that we had at the time, that there was no HD. HD TV
Right.
came in a few years into Trek. Actually, the very first HD TV show in the States was Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. And I was doing visual effects on that as well. And we did the first HD show there, and we had to have a special monitor just so that we could see the footage in the right resolution. And that was just a bizarre thing to us. But working in NTSC resolution, I'd come from Australia working in PAL, which was 100 lines more of resolution. And working in NTSC here was, I used to joke with the guys on Trek that I felt like I was drawing on golf balls. But it was the technology that we had, and it was state of the art at the time. And so we worked with what we had, and we did the best we could. And I think amazingly that the stuff has stood the test of time. And a lot of stuff that you do over the years does not. But I think, under the guidance of people like Dan Curry and Rob Legato and Gary Hutzel and Dave Takamura and all those guys, we had some, and Ron Moore, absolutely. We had some incredible guidance from those guys, and the work has stood the test of time.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the fact that you have been around during this transition from model making and working with miniatures to now CGI and, like you said, industrial light and magic, and how everything is so seamlessly done on computers now. But for me, my childhood is, I remember the stuff with the models. So all the space movies and, the Star Wars stuff for me was based on models and miniatures. And I actually have, my eye is trained to see that, and I have a more of affection for that. So I was actually a little bit disappointed with CGI as it started to come out. I felt like it wasn't as good. Really? Did you feel that?
Yeah, I think the thing that I always say to people about that is that, certainly for people who've grown up like us, being subjected to miniature work, which was very much locked in the real world, versus CG. A lot of people say that CG is garbage and it looks bad. And the truth is that CG done badly,
right,
looks bad. Miniatures done badly look bad. Anything that's done poorly is going to look bad.
Right.
But if you max out the amount of quality that you can put into whatever the technique is that you're using, then it's going to work. And one of the great pieces of advice that I ever got in my career actually came via my connection with Dan Curry. And Dan set up a meeting for me with Linwood Dunn, who, I think around 1926, invented the Acme Dunn optical printer. And the optical printer was the first device that really allowed you to take multiple pieces of footage and combine them together and effectively do a composite. And so I was talking to him, and I said, and he was in his 90s at that point, and I said, if I'm going to ever ask anybody this question, it's going to be you, because you invented my job. But what is the one guiding principle that you would recommend for a long career in visual effects? And he said, oh, that's easy. He said, spend your entire life doing shots that no one notices. And I said, okay, why is that? And he said, because, my boy, you only have one purpose in this job, and that's to serve the story. He said, the second you do a shot, it is so spectacular that somebody says, wow, what a cool effect. You failed because you made it about how clever you are and not serve the story. And she said, so be invisible your entire life and you'll be around forever. And it was a really good piece of advice that really applies to all of us in filmmaking. That, you know, if we stand out, then we're doing something wrong. If we are just seamlessly part of the story, then we're doing it right. And so, you know, getting back to miniatures, the miniatures done really well are always going to be beautiful. I did a movie a few years ago with Liam Neeson in Berlin called Unknown. And there's a scene in that where the hotel blows up. And the initial thought was that it could be approached as a CG alternative. And in the end, I convinced them to do a miniature. And a miniature was built in London, and it was blown up, and it was a one take, and it's in the movie, and it looks perfect. Because, you know, with miniatures, you get all these kind of little happy accidents from physics that you would otherwise have to think about and animate and create. Even if you've got a simulation that's a beautiful simulation, it's still going to be ticked away in the computer to generate something, and then you got to see if it feels right. When you shoot it for real, it just happens. Excuse me. So, yeah, I mean, I love miniatures as well, but I love really good CG as well. And I think, you know, one of the great examples of that now is The Mandalorian.
Right, that one's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, they're combining CG and they're combining miniatures, and the stuff's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Hey, Adam, I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit more loudly for us, if you could, or just if you've got some earphones, just plug those in, because those usually have built-in mic.
I don't have them with me.
No problem. Then just speak a little bit more loudly, and we'll hear you a little bit better.
No worries.
I did want to, by the way, Mandalorian, I totally agree. From somebody that knows nothing about visual effects at all, we can still tell that they have like this marriage of visual and practical effects that just looks just great, except for when they're passing around a doll and we're supposed to believe that's a character, but whatever. We could tell it's a doll, dude. But, you know, obviously if they don't do that, then we're going to be like, we can tell that character is CGI. So either way, you know, we just have to enjoy it. But I did kind of want to go back to when you were first hired to work Star Trek. That must have been Next Generation was the first time. Were you already a fan of Star Trek beforehand, or did you just become to appreciate it? You just come to appreciate it once you started working on it?
When I was a little kid, I lived in Tokyo for 3 years, and when I was 5, 6, 7, and one of the shows that I watched on TV in Tokyo was Star Trek, which I watched in Japanese. When I went back to Australia at 7 years old, I was watching the show in English, and it didn't seem right because the voices weren't right. They were in English. So I watched the show as a kid. But then when Next Generation came around, I was so excited about a new show. And I was in Melbourne, and I was doing visual effects in Melbourne. And when the time came to kind of come to the States, I came with a very specific goal. Three things were on the list. I wanted to work on Star Trek: The Next Generation. I wanted to work on MacGyver.
Yes.
And I wanted to work on Star Wars. And within 7 months of being in LA, I became lead animator on Next Generation. And then a few months after that, I started becoming an animator on MacGyver.
Nice.
And then a few years later, I worked on Star Wars as well. So I was very lucky. But yeah, the guys at Digital Magic, Rich Thorne, Rich took a chance on me, which was amazing. And he pitched me to Dan Curry and Rob Legato and Ron Moore. And excuse me, they looked at the work that I could do, and they said, "Okay, yeah, come on in." So I went into to join the show at Digital Magic as the assistant to Steve Price, who was the lead animator on the series. And very shortly after I started, Steve left the company because he didn't ask me at ILM to work on a hook. And so on a Friday night, I found out that I was going to, the guy that I was working for was leaving. And so I spent a very nervous weekend thinking, these guys don't know me from Adam.
Hey.
Hey. They're going to get rid of me on Monday, so this is going to be a terrible weekend. And so on the following Monday, Rich came in and he said, well, I've got good news and bad news. And I said, okay, great. What's the bad news? And the bad news is that they're very upset and they don't want Steve to leave. And but he's going to leave and he's going to go and do the thing that he needs to do. And I said, well, that's fantastic. So what's the good news? And he says, the good news is you're it. And nice. So I just took over from him that day. And I was very lucky to be able to work with like Pat Clancy and Bob Williamson and Paul Hill and all those guys that Peter Sternlight, all the guys who had been compositing on the show in the edit days. And learned a lot from them, and obviously a lot from Dan Curry and Legato and Gary and all that team. And, we're all still friends, especially Ron Moore and I have stayed dear friends for years. And I've been lucky enough to hire him on a few films that I've done and have him come in and return the favor.
Wow. I didn't know that you did anything with Star Wars. What did you do? I had no knowledge of this.
I was working at ILM. I worked on episode 3. And wow. I designed all the hologram gags, and I composited a lot of the holograms of Yoda. I'm in the movie twice. I'm in it as a full-body double hologram of Emperor Palpatine from behind. And my hand, this hand is in it. Padme's telling Anakin that she's pregnant. And he puts his hand up behind her face, and as the hand slides behind her face, it's my hand, and when it comes out, it's Hayden's. It was just, we didn't have the element, and so we had to make something up. So I shot my hand against a bit of green screen on the back of my Jeep in the parking lot, and we used that.
Sirach, were you ever
against my Jeep in the parking lot? I mean, you never thought that would be in one of the biggest production movies. It's like a Jeep hand shot. That's how good you are. Nobody would know that, right?
Yeah, but now we're gonna watch for it. Oh wow!
Yeah, wow. I also see so many other things. I mean, the list is so long. I don't really want to go through the whole thing, but so many different things that you worked on. Titanic, is that correct? Or
yeah, I was one of I think there were eight visual effects supervisors who worked on it, all under the overall supervision of Rob Legato. And I was working at POP Film, and we did about 200 shots on the film. And the proudest part of that work for me was they came to us one day and they said, so we have a bit of a problem. There's this shot, and we took it to ILM, and they said it's not possible with these elements. So we took it to Digital Domain, and they said it's not possible with these elements. And Jim Cameron owned Digital Domain at the time. So we're asking you, is this possible? And I looked at them and I said, well, I guess. I mean, it's like time and money, and if you've got the money, I'll make the time.
Yeah.
And so I told Jim that, and he said, okay, that's the correct answer. Give him the job. So it's a shot where Jack and Rose are running down a corridor, the slow motion 10-second shot of them running straight at camera down a corridor, being chased by a wall of water.
Yeah.
And it was stunt doubles running down the hallway. And I had to take the stunt doubles' heads off and put Kate and Leo's heads on. So it was about 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2.5 months.
What?
And it was all hand painted.
To put the heads on?
To put the heads on, yeah. And we got to the end of the film, and I was at a screening at Fox, and Jim came up to me and he said, like a little kid, he goes, So you know why that was so hard, don't you? And I said, well, yeah, I hand painted the whole thing. And he goes, no, there's a whole other reason. I said, what's that? He goes, it's never been done before.
Yeah.
And it turned out they had done some head replacements, but there had never been a full frame full head replacement. And there'd been some face replacements and things, but never a full head replacement. So we did that, and
there's obviously motion, like moving around. The head's not just staying stagnant.
Yeah, and they're running, so their skin's bouncing, and the water's splashing in front of them, and hitting their face and splashing off, and hair's flicking in front of Kate's face, and it was really hard. My favorite story that came out of that shot, though, is that because it was so complex and required such incredible concentration, I said to everybody in the company, just no one can come in the office while I'm working on this thing, please. I just need to be able to just focus. The only person who was allowed in was Alan, who was our boss. And so one day he knocked on the door and he stuck his head in and he goes, do you mind if I bring somebody in? And I said, oh, that's fine, come in. And you know when you kind of half pay attention to something, you go, yeah, and you go back to the screen and you don't really pay attention to what's going on over there. And I kind of heard somebody sit down next to me, and I thought, I think I need to look to my left. And I looked over to my left, and George Harrison from the Beatles was sitting next to me.
Wow, good old George.
What's he doing there?
Well, he and Alan were really old friends.
Okay.
And he was a filmmaker. Most people don't know that he was the financier behind all of the Monty Python films. And
I didn't know that.
He was fascinated by the whole pen and tablet technology that we were using on the Inferno system at the time, and had never actually seen it in operation. And so I was showing him how that worked. And I said, look, do you want to have a go? And he said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And he said, just get me a blank screen and I'll just have a scribble. And I said, well, I can't believe I'm about to say this to you because you're you, but no, I'm not going to get a blank screen. I'm in the middle of this shot. If you want to have a scribble, you got to work on this shot. And so there was a little highlight in the middle of Kate's forehead. And I said, just paint this on, like, say, frame 150. Go to frame 151, just paint the same thing on that one. And here you can toggle between the frames, and you can see where it is and see where you're going to paint. And so he did. And so there's one small piece of one frame of Titanic that was worked on by a Beatle.
That's done wrong.
Wow.
Really nice job.
No, I'm sure it was good under your supervision. So George Harrison was one of the visual effects.
I hope he was credited.
He was not credited.
He was not credited. That's
amazing.
Yeah. I have a question for you about, like, young kids out there that are listening. What skill set was it of yours that translated into you becoming in this profession? I mean, were you a good math student? Are you a good artist? What was it that translates?
At school, the things that I was worst at, probably English as well, worst at were typing and math. And now that's kind of all I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was an artist, and I trained as a fine artist and graphic designer and illustrator. And so, when I'm looking for artists to bring onto the crew, I really appreciate the digital artists who have the ability to work with manual tools and create work that way, because I find that the example that we used to give when we were hiring people was how to use an airbrush. And if all that you know of an airbrush is what comes out of the button that says airbrush, then you really don't know how to use an airbrush, because an airbrush is an incredible tool that has so much amazing flexibility. And you need to really understand what that is to be able to give it its all digitally. And so at least when that was really relevant was when the tools were very primitive digitally. The tools are so great now, and the pens, the pressure-sensitive pens, and the pens that can send out all kinds of different textures and styles that are capable of being done with a real tool that were not able to be done then, have changed the face of digital art enormously. But even so, I still really like knowing that an artist can really draw. And so for kids who are trying to get into it, just draw, learn how to draw, and don't stop, because it's a great skill, and it'll always do you well to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
You know, I used to love to draw when I was a kid, and I never got good at it. I do feel like there's some absolute talent in there. I mean, obviously the people that succeed are the ones that really, do it all day, every day, and they have a passion for doing it. But there needs to be at least a nugget of talent in there as well. Do you feel as though you attribute your success more to the talent that you were given when you were born, or more to just, working hard to eliminate whatever deficiencies you may have thought you had in certain aspects of the job?
It has to be both. Yes, you're born with a certain talent. My mother's an artist. She was a nurse, but she's an amazing artist. My dad was a painter as well, and so I inherited some artistic skill from them in no small part. I had some amazing lecturers. I had a high school art teacher who really kind of shaped who I am as an artist. And without him, I probably would not be here. His name was Rick Roughton, and Rick's no longer with us, but he played an enormous part in my life. And I will forever be grateful for that. And I think, mentoring kids and kids having mentors, no matter what they want to do, is always a good thing. But then beyond that, you obviously learn your skill and you learn your tools, and you keep on learning your tools because they're always changing, and you just keep on going. I love to do portraits, and I love doing that work, but I am by no means, an artist on the level of, say, somebody like Christian Osmond, who's a friend of mine at ILM, but he's also one of my heroes. I think he's an absolutely brilliant artist. Mark Ratz, who's a great poster artist, who's done Back to the Future and Indiana Jones, and amazing posters that we've all loved for years. And he's a friend of mine in Australia. He's in Perth in Australia, but the artistic level of those guys is just extraordinary, and I love looking to other artists for inspiration always.
You brought up the artwork that you do now and the portraits that you do.
Sirach's pretty good at art too, man. He draws little doodles for us when we're reviewing episodes. Don't be shy, Sirach.
I'm a doodler. I am a doodler, but I've had the privilege of being around professional artists, not as great and accomplished as you, but guys that in my neighborhood, in my neck of the woods, that have actually made a career out of being an artist in animation and other things. So I have a tremendous respect for the craft, and I appreciate art. I mean, in all kinds of form, whether it's portrait art or abstract art, all different kinds. But I wanted to ask you about your portrait work and why, what got you to kind of take your skill set and go into making those portraits.
I had been doing digital art for so long, and I hadn't really done real art in quite a while. I'd done a little bit of painting here and there, but I love drawing, and I hadn't done a lot of drawing for a long time. And I was inspired by a friend of mine who I used to work with at ILM, who went out and started doing some portrait work and has become very successful doing that. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, I can do that. I want to start doing that. And so I just threw myself into doing portraits again, and realized that I could actually do it. I could still draw. Oh, wow, digital hasn't killed me. And so, you go through moments of being very inspired and really on and able to do them. And then you go through moments of, it's kind of like writer's block. You put pen to paper and it just doesn't work. But if you keep on trying, it'll come back. And I've been lucky to do some portraits that were really great. I have had a few commissions which have been lovely over the last few years. I've got a show coming up at a gallery in Sarasota, Florida, toward the end of September, a fine art gallery, where they're going to be showing some of my portraits, which is lovely. And I used to live up in Cape Cod for a few years, and I had a few shows up there. So it's just nice to be able to do portraits of people and have them look at them and say, wow, that's the person. I did one of an old friend of mine, Steve Moore, who was the visual effects editor on Titanic. And Steve and I had done a bunch of commercials over the years leading up to Titanic. And then he died suddenly a few years ago. And so I did a portrait of him for his two daughters. And one of his daughters wrote to me and said, how did you get that twinkle in his eye that we only ever saw? And you try and capture the essence of the person. And, it's a real joy to kind of hear back from people when you have done that.
And the website is called adamhowardart.com. So check that out. We'll also include that in the description box below. I've been checking it out, and that's you absolutely do capture their essence. And I first noticed that with the Mick Jagger portrait, because you didn't draw a picture of him smiling or just singing behind a mic or frowning. You've got a picture of he's just all teeth and he's doing something. He's singing Satisfaction or something. And then I looked at the others and I'm like, yeah, you're really trying to capture that personality, that whatever it is that makes them iconic, or that iconic element that lies within them. The website again is adamhowardart.com. We'll include that in the description box below. Adam, do you have a portrait that you're most proud of out of the ones that you've drawn, whether it's the one that you think you've really captured what it means to be that person, or the one that you thought was going to be a really tough job to do or tough one to do, and you pulled it off and you're just kind of hang your hat on it like, all right, I did it?
I don't know. I mean, I'm glad when each one is done, because getting to that point is an interesting journey. One of my favorite ones that I did was one of Anthony Hopkins,
right?
From back when he had hair, and he's kind of sitting like this, and that one really worked. I mean, one of the things that I love drawing the most are eyes, because eyes, they say eyes are the window to the soul, and they truly are. I mean, if you can capture eyes of somebody, you can really get the rest of their face. And when I'm drawing them, I start with the eyes, and I kind of stream out from there.
Like the one of John Cleese I was looking at a little while ago, where he's got like this expression that's perfect.
Yeah, the one of John was good, and the one of Keith Richards and Mick is great. There's a lot there, and I don't know. Everybody just go and have a look at the website and see what you think.
Everybody will pick their own favorites.
Yeah. Well, I think they all have different meanings, and like you said, the one you did for your friend that passed away, I mean, that probably, means so much to his family. So they can all have different reasons for having meaning behind it.
Yeah. Everyone has a different story.
Yeah. We talked about earlier. You talked about talent, and how, Ryan, you said you needed this like inherent talent to be successful. And that actually made me think of a quote that I enjoy saying, and that is that hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard.
Yeah.
So, you always, if you have talent, you still have to work hard.
Absolutely. And, I remember my grandfather telling me once, never stop learning.
Mm-hmm.
Because the day you stop learning is the day it's over. And it's essentially the same thing. I mean, you can never take anything for granted. You can never take what you know for granted. And I think we all know a lot more than we think we do. We all have had more experiences than we remember. And trying to stay on top of that and make the most of that is a really important thing. And I have friends and colleagues just all reminding me of that all the time.
Do you have more fun working on science fiction than you would do for action and adventure, or is there no real preference? It's all the same to you.
You know, there's really no preference, because getting back to what When We're Done said to me, you got to make it invisible. And so whether we're putting a shuttle on an asteroid like we did in Armageddon, or we're putting a head on a body in Titanic, or I'm doing the chalkboard in the opening titles of The Simpsons. I mean, it's just got to fit the story, and it's got to feel right. And so every show has its own challenges, and sometimes they're challenges that don't even have anything to do with the shots themselves. They're just challenges of production and dealing with situations. So yeah, it's always a learning experience, and I love it all. I love the business. I've been doing it for 40 years now, and I'll be doing it for the rest of my life. That's for sure.
You know, you said we only have a couple minutes left here, but you said that you joined in on Deep Space Nine around what, like the fourth or fifth season?
No, I joined Next Generation at the beginning of season 5. I was on Deep Space from the very first episode.
So does that mean that you had something to do with the wormhole?
We did shots involving the wormhole. Digital Magic didn't do the wormhole elements. It was done by another company. And that stuff was CG, but that was the kind of CG that you could do because it was, a fantastical kind of image. Anything that was kind of real world and had to be very real and gritty was difficult in CG, but the wormhole was a prime example of that, and Rob Legato and Gary Hutzel were the guys pulling that stuff off. But then we would combine the miniatures of the shuttles coming in and out of the wormhole, and anything that needed to be used with the wormhole in the compositing that we were doing. So yeah, I didn't create it in and of itself, but I did use those elements.
So people know when they're looking at your work on Deep Space Nine. Can you tell us specifically, like, the elements that you did create on Deep Space Nine? So that way, when we're watching it, we can be like, oh, Adam Howard.
Anytime somebody fires a phaser, no matter what race they're from, I designed them and animated them. Certainly for the first few seasons of the show. And then actually one of my favorites was the very first time the Defiant showed up. And there's just one sweeping shot of the Defiant coming into frame and flying through, and it's firing all these torpedo cannons.
I think we just saw that episode
episode
2 weeks ago. It was like the first time we really see it in action, and you see all the firepower, like the pulse cannons
it's
going nuts.
Ducking under major phaser beams, and Gary Hutzel came to me and he said, so we've got this new ship, and it needs to be firing something, and it's got to be powerful, and it's got to be cool. Make something up. And I literally had like 20 minutes, half an hour to make something up. And so I said to him, okay, well, where does it have to come from? He goes, I don't know, just make it look cool. And so I found a couple of forks in the little diagonal nacelles at the front. And I thought, well, machine gun fire would be good because it would be a great sound cue. Sort of like a hot ball trail, like more like a photon torpedo kind of thing. So I just painted that thing up, and that's one of my favorite shots that I did from Deep Space. Of the thousands of shots that I did on Deep Space, it was funny. A few years after I left, somebody else was on the show, and they did the Defiant doing the same thing. And somebody at home wrote to Paramount and said, we've got an issue with that because that's not what it looks like. It's supposed to look like what it did in this episode.
Yeah, they'll notice.
They'll notice. That
But,
episode was called The Defiant. It was season 3. That was my sketching of it right there, of that whipping through shot. Very, very good. I mean, I loved seeing it. It was so sexy when in that sweeping panning shot where you kind of look over it and you can see it from a rooftop kind of angle.
I do have to say, while we're talking about Deep Space, it's really nice to see you, because
it's
last
so
time
great.
I saw you was on set with Deep Space. So I did a lot of stuff.
So many years later, I wish I had gotten the chance to talk with you more and really picked your brain at that time, because I could have, had so much more knowledge. But I'm just glad that we ended up crossing paths again.
Yeah.
And you are part of the unsung heroes of our show, because you're not in front of the camera, and and not everybody recognizes your face. You're one of the guys that makes this thing work, just like the writers and just like all of the people who are not in front of the camera. And it wouldn't be what it is without your contribution. And I think that people out there should really be aware that it's the actors just do a small part, and that if it wasn't for people like you and people like Ron Moore and Ira and everybody who's involved behind the scenes, none of this magic comes to life. So I thank you for everything and making me look good and making the show look good.
Yeah, thank you so much. Look, I think that's one of the great things about film and TV, that it's such a collaborative effort. Mm-hmm. No one person ever creates a show or a film. It's hundreds and hundreds of people, and one of those people drops and the whole thing falls apart. It's an amazing thing to me that any episode or any film ever gets finished, because the possibility of it not coming together is always high. But somehow it always does, because people stay professional and they work hard and they do beautiful work, and it all just keeps on going.
Yeah,
well, you're not too unsung, because you did get nominated 9 times for an Emmy. So
you're very sung.
You're properly sung in the world that you're in. Yeah. But the other part of us that haven't heard the song, we definitely we appreciate it, man. You're awesome. You're awesome, and I mean, just the list. We haven't even touched some of the stuff like. I mean, Cosmos, Twilight. I mean, just the list is so long that it's almost a shame to try to go through it. But you're just that amazing, and I see why that they keep you working, because you're so easy to listen to and calm. I don't know if that's adds to it, but I feel like I could talk to you about we can go on and on. It's just having a great kind of conversation with you, Adam. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ron.
And you're good at tutoring George Harrison, by the way. We didn't even notice.
Yeah, he was pretty invisible.
It is really cool. For me personally, like I said, when you're a kid and you're watching these things and you're growing up seeing these iconic images that stay with you, whether it's the Defiant blowing your mind with its firepower and you're like, whoa, that is cooler than the regular phaser that I'm used to seeing on the Enterprise or whatever, or when you're seeing, Alien number 7 shooting a phaser, otherwise it would just, without you'd be like bubbles coming out or whatever they do, So it is really cool. It must be in some way gratifying to know that people know and recognize and were inspired and affected by your work, even if it wasn't on the script, on the page, or, an actual human doing a performance, but you're actually creating things that people remember for the rest of their lives.
It's really lovely that we're doing this 30 years later. It's amazing that it's testament to Trek too, that, Star Trek has this incredible effect on people worldwide. It doesn't matter what country you come from, what language you speak. Star Trek is kind of a universal understanding, and I'm incredibly proud to have been part of it. And and grateful for the experiences and the friendships that I've made, that I've maintained all these years. I think back to Digital Magic, and all of us who worked at that company are still dear friends. And that's a long time ago, but we were doing something right.
Definitely. I mean, you worked on MacGyver, so.
I mean, I feel like when you're in the trenches together, maybe you can relate, but when you work in the trenches with people, and it's kind of the same bond that you have in the military, and you're out fighting together. You kind of never lose that bond. You always remember those moments, and that's the thing that kind of holds you together.
Yeah, I think I've got something like 4,500 friends on Facebook, and somebody said to me once, "How can you possibly have that many friends?" And I said, "The majority of them are people I've worked with over the years,
right.
And I just stay in touch with them." You're absolutely right, Sirach. You get thrown together. It's a really unique kind of thing, and I've heard other people say the same thing that you said, but the closest kind of thing to it is the military. People from all these different walks of life get thrown together, and they have to get on. They have to work together, and you don't have time to build up to that. Day one, you got to work together, and if you're lucky enough to do shows like we did together, over a long time, then you get to know each other and you get to work together even better. But it's an extraordinary thing, and so because of that forced bond, you do stay friends for a long time. It's pretty powerful.
Absolutely.
Well, we're just about out of time here. Sorry, Sirach, were you saying one more thing?
No, I was just agreeing with him. That's how I feel about everybody I worked with, and it's just you just feel part of a brotherhood, and that's just that's what it really is. It's a fraternity or sorority, however you want to look at it, but it's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that all these years later we can sit back and still talk about it and laugh at good old times. I mean, that's really what it's about.
Absolutely, it's a powerful thing, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, 4-time Emmy award-winning Adam Howard, thanks so much for joining us. I think it's awesome that all 9 of those Emmy nominations were all Star Trek, and all the wins were all Star Trek. That's pretty awesome for us, at least. For you, you're like, yeah, I just want more Emmys. But for us, we're like, it's cool that they were all Star Trek.
If I won an Emmy, I'd have it wrapped around my neck on a necklace so that people could see it all the time.
There it is.
You go. That's how you go.
Great. You may not want to do
that. It's a little heavy, but
worth it.
It's worth it. You just gotta hold it back when you lean forward to eat.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, Adam. It's been a pleasure.
Tell them the website again, Ryan, so that people can check it out.
AdamHowardArt.com in the description box below. Check it out. Lots of good stuff. Tons of it. More than I expected. I didn't realize it would be so extensive. I love it. I didn't see a George Harrison one, though. I hope he's there.
And people need to go on IMDb also to check out his work history, just so you can really get a grasp of how large his resume is.
Right. We'll also include that in the description box below. Check him out on IMDb. See all the work that he does. You're going to be like, oh, he did that. Oh, he did. Oh, well, There's so much stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Adam. We hope to see you again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
And for those of you at home, we'll see you next time. Bye.